story we're getting ready to talk about is actually an update. So I spoke about this a while ago. So this is kind of going to be a conclusion to the story. Probably won't be talking about it again after this. But before we get into the details and what happened, what this woman did was absolutely horrendous. So prepare yourself for the details because it might be quite a bit disturbing. But let me give you a disclaimer about my kind of content. Some viewers may find the following content offensive and controversial. The information in this video comes from multiple sources, including court records, official police charges, news web articles, and interviews. This video commentary also contains my personal opinions about the facts of this story. The point is to use this story as a cautionary tale in hopes of preventing tragedies like these to children going forward. Viewer discretion is advised. That is your official disclaimer. And I'm getting this story from cbsnews.com, so thank you very much for the article. A jury on Friday found a Western Michigan woman guilty of murder and child abuse and the starvation death of her disabled 15-year-old son who weighed 69 pounds. 69 pounds at 15 years old. Do the math. Everybody knows that that does not add up at all. The Muskegon County Circuit Court jury deliberated just over an hour before convicting the fool that you guys see on my screen right there. Her name is Shanda Vander Ark. So a lot of you guys might remember this story. She's allegedly 44 years old. She looks a lot older than that, quite a bit older than that, but she's 44, of Norton Shores in July 6th of 2022, the death of Timothy Ferguson, which we didn't have a picture before. I believe that's the correct picture right there. It was an earlier picture, but I believe because, like I said, it doesn't pose a risk, a danger to this child who's deceased. But I like to pay homage. That's who we believe to be Timothy Ferguson. An autopsy determined that the teenager died of malnutrition or malnourishment, Same thing. An autopsy determined that the teenager died from malnourishment and hypothermia. The medical examiner ruled his death as a homicide. Video shown by Court TV appeared to show Vander Ark become violently ill after being shown photos of her son's emaciated body. I think she was just playing the game. She didn't really care. She clearly didn't care. Vander Ark was sick and not in the courtroom when the jury reached its verdict. The jury said Vander Ark was not required by law to be present for her verdict. She faces a mandatory life in prison sentence when she is sentenced on January 29th, which is beautiful. That is awesome. That's exactly what she deserves. Life in prison. I would add the stipulation, no parole, no chance of parole. Vander Ark's attorney, Fred Johnson, argued his client did not grasp the harm she caused her son and did not know he was starving to death. Bullshit. She knew. However, Muskegon County Deputy Prosecutor Matt Roberts disputed that notion that she tortured her son by feeding him bread and hot sauce, putting him in ice baths in the bathtub, another bathtub story, depriving him of sleep, and locking the refrigerator and food cabinets. She killed him. She starved him to death, Roberts said, and I absolutely agree. Timothy Ferguson had some mental disabilities and was being homeschooled, prosecutors said. Allegedly homeschooled. I'll say allegedly. Vander Ark's other son, 20-year-old Paul Ferguson, who you guys saw in the picture, allegedly participated in the abuse. Paul Ferguson faces one count of first-degree child abuse, which I think is a felony if I'm not mistaken. So let me give you guys a fair usage. I only got like a couple of news videos. Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without the authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use. It is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107. I would love for the people who have already heard this story before to catch up on it. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this. Facing mandatory life in prison. How much time should her 20-year-old son get? I don't know. I'd say for participating maybe 15 years. Do y'all think that'd be fair? Here we go.
Can the foreperson please rise and announce the verdict?
She has to read the whole thing, or?
Typically, there's no set way to do it, but typically you could say in the people of the state of Michigan versus, and then on one count what the verdict is and count two.
In the people of the United States versus Shanda Van Ark, count one.
I think you mean people of the state of Michigan, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I apologize.
Okay, all right. That's
The
okay.
people of the state of Michigan versus Shanda Van Ark, count one, charging open murder involving the death of Timothy Ferguson. We find her guilty of first-degree felony murder. Count two, first-degree child abuse. We find her guilty of first-degree child abuse.
Breaking news right now. A Norton Shores woman accused of abusing and killing her 15-year-old son over a year ago has been found guilty. Shanda Vander Ark refused to return to the stand today after answering questions from the prosecutor yesterday, and even vomited after being shown photos of her son from hours before he died. Her defense attorney said Vander Ark waived her right to attend, citing medical distress. 13 Your Side's Jeremiah Brown has been in the courtroom all day and joins us now live with more. JD, what can you tell us?
Well, Elena, after an hour of deliberation, the jury had their verdict and found her guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse. Today, both the prosecution and the defense made their closing arguments to the jury, the prosecution reiterating just the extreme and unusual punishment she subjugated Timothy Ferguson to, including feeding him hot sauce on bread, starvation, and even restraining his hands and legs with cuffs. The defense said that she was not aware of that the punishments would ultimately lead to his death. This morning, the prosecution showed a video to those in the court taken from a camera Vander Ark had placed in the small room that detectives say was really a small closet that Timothy was placed in. The video showed Vander Ark and her son finding Timothy, who was unresponsive. 18 minutes passed before they called 911. Vander Ark can be heard telling her son Paul to help place him in another room and to make it look like he was found there. She is heard telling police that Timothy was on a hunger strike, which yesterday Paul testified saying was a lie.
And make no mistake, he was a prisoner in that home.
Guilty on all counts, Shanda Vander Ark will now be awaiting sentencing in the death of her son, Timothy Ferguson. She was accused of torturing him until his death last year. However, she wasn't even in the courtroom as her fate was decided.
Count one, charging open murder involving the death of Timothy Ferguson. We find her guilty of first-degree felony murder.
Even though she wasn't in the courtroom for the verdict, Shanda Vander Ark was found guilty of both murder and child abuse in the death of her son, Timothy Ferguson. Prosecutors say punishments that included ice baths and a consuming hot sauce and malnourishment contributed to Timothy's death. Vander Ark did not want to come back to the courtroom because of medical distress. During closing arguments, her attorney argued Vander Ark committed manslaughter, not murder.
They caused this boy's death, but they didn't intend to. That's simply it. We're asking that you, when you do your deliberations, that you consider that.
Matt Roberts was the prosecutor for Vander Ark's trial, calling today's verdict justice for Timothy.
I think as much as can be found, sure. I mean, the justice would be that Timothy is still here, and unfortunately we can't do that, and sadly a large part of what we have to do is to speak up for people who are no longer here, who can't be here.
Roberts commenting on Vander Ark's absence in the courtroom Friday.
Honestly, it feels sort of like a cowardly way out, but I'm also not going to say that if she had some type of legitimate medical condition that kept her from coming to court, that certainly, those things happen.
And the judge thanking the jury for seeing disturbing images and listening to hard-to-swallow text messages.
It was not for the faint of heart, and certainly those of you who did this, unfortunately, it's unfortunate that you will not get those images out of your mind. I won't. But somebody had to do it, and I'm glad that you were willing to do that.
Vander Ark's sentencing is scheduled for late next month. Her son Paul has a court hearing next week to decide if he will have a trial or plead to first-degree child abuse. He cooperated with prosecutors in Vander Ark's trial.
So again, to the son for participating, I'd say 15 years for him. For her getting life, that sounds about right, since life is usually about 25 years to life. But You know, with this kid having disabilities and the fact that she thought this out, which is why I believe it is murder, for her to sit there and to do all of this, not only to do all of that in the extenuating circumstances, to sit there and say that he was on a hunger strike. A 15-year-old boy with disabilities really on a hunger strike for what? Y'all fat butts didn't look like y'all was missing no meals, but it's just really, really sad. And like I said, if that's an accurate picture of that boy, which I'm not sure, but I think it is, 'cause it took a lot of trying to find it. But if that's him, young Prince, RIP, and hopefully this could symbolize some level of justice for his lost life. But that mother, just a bad person all the way around. But let me know what you guys think about this, especially for those who have been following this. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment as well, please, okay? Thank you.